Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Random Redshirt podcast. I am one of the hosts, Zach, and the other host with me, as always, is Chris. What's up, buddy?
Hello, Zach. Hello, everyone around the world. Zach, awesome to be here as always with you, my dear friend. And hopefully, we've got people in Antarctica watching. That's always makes me feel good. But thanks to everyone around the world for watching us, being there when we were on leave and working, and enjoying our episodes. It's awesome.
Yeah, for sure. If you haven't checked out our most recent episode where we talked about the Battlestar Galactica miniseries, that was a fantastic time.
Yeah.
We absolutely had a blast talking about BSG. If you have watched it or listened to it, then you know that BSG holds a special place in my heart from the memories I have with some buddies watching that back in the day when it came on the Sci-Fi Channel as brand new episodes. Um, yeah, it was a good time, and we'll definitely come back to Battlestar Galactica again for sure. We'll definitely come back to it.
Yeah, this week we even talked more about Battlestar Galactica, right? I know you're catching up on some episodes, and then and I had watched those episodes not too long ago, so we got really into like some great discussions on all of the stuff on Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah, it was great. I love talking about that show. There's so much to dissect in those shows. And honestly, if it was a new show that was on right now, I could easily see us doing a, recap and review of each week's episode like we do for, Strange New Worlds and we did for Picard and things like that, because there'd be a lot to unpack doing a single episode at a time.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So when we get back to Battlestar Galactica, it'll be awesome to talk through whichever episodes we decide to talk to. That's going to be a lot of fun.
And there are some dandies in BSG for sure. I think I'm only, I don't know, like 5 or 6 episodes in, maybe 4 or 5 episodes into season one. I mean,
Mhm.
each season's not 20 some episodes like it was in Star Trek, but
Mhm.
um, for sure, it'll be a lot of fun to jump back into that. So if you haven't watched it or listened to it, go back and watch and listen to the Battlestar Galactica, where we discuss just the mini series of BSG, and then we'll jump into the other stuff at some point in time. But
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely.
but if this is your first time checking us out, welcome to the Random Redshirt podcast. We are a couple of nerdy guys who like to talk about all things nerdy, Star Trek, Star Wars, everything in between. And we're jumping back into Star Trek. We're gonna continue our spotlight series as we discuss the Mirror Universe, and we have moved on to. Is this the second to last? I think this is the second to last
For
Deep Space
DS9.
Nine
Yeah.
Mirror Universe episode.
Yeah, that's
I
like
know there's been a few.
yeah, we've already reviewed at least two from DS9 on Mirror Universe
I think
episodes.
we've done 3 or 4 now, I
Could
want to
have been.
say.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's one more DS9 Mirror Universe episode, and that is The Emperor's New Cloak, which is a little bit of
Mm,
a more of a humorous Mirror Universe episode that deals with Quark and Rom having to rescue the Grand Nagus
mhm.
from the alternate universe. So that's a great Ferengi episode. And we've said it before, and I know you do too, Chris, but we both love the Ferengi episodes.
Yeah, the Ferengi are there's so much more fleshed out in DS9, and DS9 helped flesh them out, but they're funny. They're hilarious. It's a great kind of culture that they built, very humorous, and very clever. So they
Yeah,
are
it
enjoyable.
a lot of credit goes to Armin Shimmerman
Mm,
for really being the the face of the Ferengi, so to speak, right? I mean, I look at Worf as kind of the face of the Klingons. I mean, he's probably the most well-known Klingon in the Star Trek franchise. I would say Quark is definitely the most well-known Ferengi in the Star Trek franchise. So definitely hats off to Armin Shimmerman. Hats off to um, Aaron Eisenberg, who unfortunately is no longer with us, who played Nog, and of course we can't forget Max Grodensik, who played Rom.
mhm.
So between Quark, Rom, and Nog, those three, and then of course you get the Grand Nagus, played by Wallace Shawn. I mean, there's a lot to love about the Ferengi. Even Jeffrey Combs plays a Ferengi, right? He plays Liquidator
Yeah,
Brunt, who I'm a
Liquidator
huge fan of that
Brunt.
character quite a bit. I really love Liquidator Brunt. I think he brings a lot to the show, even if he's only in a handful of episodes.
He's the Ferengi everyone loves to hate.
Yeah,
Liquidator Brunt. Yeah.
right. I mean, he's the Ferengi tax collector, right? So
hmm Yeah. Uh,
Yeah, but on this episode, we're going to talk about Star Trek Deep Space Nine Resurrection, which is the next in line of the Mirror Universe episodes. But I know, Chris, you recently had watched something that you wanted to share.
yeah, I watched this on Prime, and this is a lesser known science fiction movie, but it was called the name of the movie is Predestination, and it's based off of a Robert Heinlein short story. Robert Heinlein, who wrote uh, Starship Troopers, which we both love. So this was I had never heard about it, and you like nothing like a really about this movie. But it did after I watched it, then I really want to go back and I'm going to read the Robert Heinlein short story. Um, I'm I'm not going to go into it too much because if you go into it too much, there's a lot of spoilers. Um, it does start off on a very slow pace. There's a lot of dialogue and a lot of talking. Ethan Hawke is in it, and I think
Oh, nice.
Ethan Hawke does a fantastic job. I really liked Ethan Hawke's character. Um, but this movie deals a lot with um, paradox and identity and destiny. Um, and so, not a lot of characters in there. And I think it's going to throw you for like some twists. But what really got me was this was written, many decades ago from Robert Heinlein. But and I didn't realize that until after the movie. I saw, oh, this was a Robert Heinlein short story, but it really felt like a contemporary type of story.
Hmm.
So if you have a chance to watch it, and then we can come back, I'll read the short story, and then we can talk about that on a future episode.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that sounds cool for
yeah,
sure. Ethan Hawke's a good actor. He's been in a lot of really good stuff. So, in fact, he was in Gattaca, wasn't he?
yeah. He was in Gattaca.
That wasn't it? Yeah, that's right. Sometimes I
Oh,
get him and Christian Slater's movies mixed up
yeah.
sometimes, but yeah, Gattaca I think he was in. That's another really good movie too.
It is a good movie. Yeah, we should talk about that one sometime.
Yeah, that would be good for sure.
Yeah.
So yes, again, if you're new, be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. If you're listening to this, you can find the video version of this and many other episodes on our YouTube channel. I believe we are think we're somewhere in the 40s as far as videos go. It's not all of our episodes. You
Mhm.
are watching us on YouTube and you want to check out other episodes in an audio only format, be sure to go wherever you find your favorite podcasts. That's where you can find us and even other ones we don't even know about, probably
That's right.
some of those
That's right.
other more obscure podcast platforms. But yeah, so we're here to talk about Star Trek Deep Space Nine Resurrection. This is the next installment in our Mirror Universe look, our Spotlight series as we continue through the Mirror Universe. We have this one more, like we just mentioned, the Emperor's New Cloak, and then we get into the fantastic two-part, like your shirt,
Uh-huh.
Enterprise Mirror
That's right.
Universe episode. Yeah, called In a Mirror Darkly, part 1 and 2, which is absolutely incredible. I love that two parts episode.
Most excellent. Yeah. That's going to be
Yeah.
good.
So, yeah, so let's jump into this. All right, so we start out with Major Kira and Dax. They are coming down the turbo lift. They're headed to ops, and they're kind of having, just a casual conversation talking about who Kira might bring to the dinner that Dax invited her to.
Yeah, it is kind of casual. It is foreshadowing in a little bit, right? Because we're talking about Dax is asking about who who Kira might be romantically interested or interested like in different potential dates for the dinner, and so they start talking about different potential candidates, and those candidates with that might have transparent craniums or transparent brains or three eyes. So that was kind of funny. So you do get the sense like Kara's Major Kira is missing a significant other, and they're trying to set her up with anybody.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
a certain captain who we never see in the show, as far as I can remember,
Mm.
but constantly comes up in conversations, usually involving Kira and Dax, and that's Captain Baudet because of his
Yeah.
transparent skull. Right, you can see
Yeah.
his brain, and Kira's just not down with the idea of going on a date with somebody where you can literally see his brain. That would be weird, wouldn't it? Where you go on a date with somebody and like you can see like their innards, like that would be a bit strange.
Yeah. Yeah. That would be. I would have been. interesting if they do that on like in a future Star Trek where they have that particular species and they bring it into one of the episodes. That would be that'd be kind of cool to see what they do.
That would be neat for sure. So Kira and Dax arrive at Ops. They're still discussing
Ah,
this. Kira is very picky, obviously, about who she dates, although sometimes maybe not. Um, but shortly after they arrive, Chief O'Brien, the man, the myth, the legend,
that's right.
uh, gets some type of very unusual transporter signal, which is strange because they note that there's no ship within transporter range. And then all of a sudden, somebody appears in the transporter pad. Kira has gone over to, see who it is. And bam, we get Vedic Barile. Oh, well, maybe it's
Baril's
not
that.
quite Vedic Barile, but it is a Barile. And Kira is beyond shocked
It
because
is.
in the Prime universe, right? Barial's died at this point. Now we're into season 6 of DS9. Barile has died. Her Barile that she knows.
Yeah.
Remember, I mean, if you guys know DS9 enough, you know that Kira and Barile had a kind of on again, off again romantic relationship. And then Barile dies, and there's even a moment in one of the episodes, and I don't remember which one it was, where Odo becomes very jealous of Barile,
Hmm.
right? Because Odo has feelings for Kira. He's had feelings
Hmm.
for her for a long time. And he becomes very jealous of Barile. And so this on again, off again relationship that they have, makes this difficult when he passes away, obviously when he dies. But then she sees Mirror Barile on the transporter pad. Looks a little bit different, obviously. Did you think, Chris, when you saw this kind of moment here in this beginning intro before you get to the opening credits or the opening intro of DS9, the reaction that Kira has of Barile and seeing the mirror version of him is eerily similar to the reaction Cisco has the first time he sees Mirror Jennifer?
Hmm. Yeah, it is a similar reaction, and she's confused, right, when she sees him, and she doesn't quite know. She's kind of stunned, right,
Yeah.
as a reaction there. Um, so that was, yeah, that was good that they did it with Cisco, and good that they did it with Major Kira as well. So I like that they had that with the two main characters in DS9.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah,
Now
yeah,
we get the opening theme and everything else, and then we
yeah.
come back, and Barile has taken Kira hostage, demanding a ship.
And of course, it's Kira that's hostage. Of course, it's Kira that's taken hostage.
Well, she's also the
Yeah,
closest one to him, right? Because
yeah, yeah,
she
yeah,
she decides to approach the transporter pad right before he beams in, and then she's standing there. And I think just the shock seeing him makes her obviously an easy target to just grab and hold at, phaser point instead of gun
yeah,
point, phaser point.
yeah, absolutely. And so what Captain Cisco says, hey, I think he calls Odo and says, we've got a hostage situation. And Bareil says, hey, I want a shuttlecraft. And says, all right, they're going to go to the shuttle. They're going to go to the shuttle bay. And they end up like walking, like what, 157 levels or 57 levels, some
Yeah,
like
57 or something
crazy,
like that. Yeah.
crazy amount of levels going up. And
I mean, he was smart not to take the turbo lift, right? Because if he took turbo lift, he's right. They could just shut it down. They'd be trapped in there and he'd be hosed. So very,
yeah,
very smart on his part.
yeah, it was. So that was good. And they get to that level that they're supposed to be at. And I think Major Curious says, no, I'm not going to help you anymore. And he's like, oh, well, it's too bad that I've got, really didn't want to kill you, but now I've got to kill you. And she says, well, your disruptor is not going to work anyways, right? It's got a cracked power cell.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, how long did you know? And how long did you know? And she knew since the very beginning.
Yeah. Since they left ops or something like that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And
But it's interesting because you see, if she knew that and she left ops and went all that way with him, that tells you how much seeing him, even though it's not the Belial she knew, how much seeing him has affected her and how
yeah,
quickly it affected her.
yeah. And I think she wanted to probably gain some information along the way, right? As they're walking up there, kind of she wanted to get a sense of what's his motivation, why is he here, and do some kind of intel.
Yeah.
She kind of
Yeah, she's not
dispatches him. Yeah. She
yeah.
dispatches him like really quickly, like with a judo throw, like really fast.
Well, I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Let's think about it too, right? I mean, she was a freedom fighter, right?
Yeah.
She had to fight Cardassians and things. I think she can handle Belial, in this case. But you're right. I mean, it was pretty quick. He didn't stand much of a chance. She flipped him over onto his back, and then Odo and some other security guards come out of the what's it called? Gosh,
Oh,
I'm blanking tonight. My
oh,
brain is not functioning.
the lift or
No, they come out of the whatever it is. The doors open, they come out. You know what I mean?
yeah,
The
the
doors
other
that
hallway.
close,
Yeah.
the doors that close so that you don't get sucked out into space. Why am I I'm drawing
Oh,
such a
the
blank
airlock.
here?
The
The
airlock. They were
airlock,
in the
goodness
airlock. Yeah.
gracious. Thank you. My gosh. My
Oh.
brain is not functioning tonight. So, anyways, yes, they come out of the airlock and then all of a sudden we cut and he's now in a holding cell.
Yeah. And she's pretty sympathetic to him, as I recall. She's like, oh, wanting to grant him maybe asylum. Was that it? And Cisco's pretty skeptical about it. Um, and I, I think it's not too long after this, Cisco is sharing with Kira his experience with Jennifer, saying, I know how you feel. Um, I felt like that with Jennifer. I know how you would feel with Burrell, but it's not the same Burrell, just like Jennifer was not the same Jennifer. So he's given her some advice. And yeah, I think he's pretty empathetic too. He's given Kira a lot of space to make her own decisions, I'd say. All right. Because I mean, he went down the path he went, he made his own decision. He's going to give Kira the same kind of freedom to do that as well.
And you hit the nail on the head there, Chris. He has a lot of experience with this, right? We've had
Yeah.
several episodes where he's had significantly difficult situations he's had to work through with Mir Jennifer, right? This idea because doesn't he even say something to Jake at one point where he's like, if I'm not careful, I'd fall in love with her or something along
Mhm.
those lines, right? Because it looks just like her, but it's not her in the sense that of who he knew. And this is the same situation. Kira's going through the same thing. And I'm trying to think, Chris, if you can think back to previous episodes of DS9 up to this point, because now that we're in season 6, this episode, I was there only that one scene with Cisco in the whole episode? I don't think
Oh
Cisco
yeah.
shows up again the entire episode. I
Yeah.
mean, how many episodes were there in DS9 that I can think of? Not many, where you barely see the captain, if at all. There
Yeah.
weren't many.
We saw more of Worf in this episode,
Yeah,
and Worf wasn't really central either, but we saw
no.
more of like Worf and Dax.
And Bashir.
Oh yeah, yeah. Bashir's like comical like entrance into
Yeah,
ops. He's like,
yeah.
uh, what did he want? Like, where was his?
He was trying to get basically personal information about
Yeah,
Kira or whatever, and they could see right through it. And he's like, "Well, I guess I'm out of here, or whatever." So
yeah.
yeah,
You
it's
know,
true. We don't see much of Cisco in this.
yeah, yeah. We don't. Oh, this which that was
It's
probably
not a bad. It's not
right.
a
Yeah,
bad thing necessarily. I mean, it's okay to have episodes that are very non-captain centric, right? I mean,
yeah,
there's so many episodes where the captain, obviously, because he's a captain, is so prevalent and is the center of that episode. And at this point now, obviously, we're in season 6 of DS9, so he is a captain now. He's not a commander anymore. But it's nice to have other episodes that are really focused specifically on other characters.
yeah. I agree. It's nice. You know who I liked in this episode a lot was I liked Worf. It was I'm skipping around a little bit, but when Bashir comes up to Ops, Worf just kind of looks at Bashir and says, like, we can see right through you. And he's kind of plays that deadpan, and I
Yeah.
like that. And when there's a dinner, and sorry, I'm skipping around a little bit too, but there's Baral's at dinner, and Baral's telling a story about his experience with the Klingon in the alternate universe. And at the end, Worf was like, "Well, you told a good story, but obviously, like you're exaggerating or you're, not being truthful." Um,
Yeah.
and Baral does something and with the batleth, and Worf's just
Cutting
kind
a
of
cutting a cake or something like
yeah,
that, or
cutting the
dessert or
cake.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, and Worf just kind of doesn't say anything, and he says, "More blood wine."
Yeah.
So
Okay. I'm gonna ask you this question, all right?
yeah.
I'm curious in your thoughts. Do you think Worf is the most comedic or funniest character in Star Trek?
Ah,
Maybe there's somebody else, but I'm curious of where you think, like, I know this is a little bit of a sidebar here, but
uh-huh.
because you're talking about some of these funny moments to the
Yeah.
Worf, do you think Worf is one of or the funniest character in Star Trek?
I think yeah, his the comedy with Worf in Star Trek is because his character is so stoic and he's a warrior. So like his comedy is like when he's in these situations, right? Just you're probably thinking of the one where he is not a merry man as
Yeah,
well,
of
and he's in
course.
he's in
Yep.
tights, and he's just having him as a character in these situations makes it funny because Worf is just he's Worf all the time, right? Whatever circumstance he's in, and so yeah, he's pretty funny. I think the funny stuff that you have with that might be with Data, maybe is a different kind of flavor because Data is more kind of an innocent character, right? Because he's he wants to be human, he desires to be human. He's kind of a Pinocchio-ish character and trying to find his way. So the humor in that is certainly different than the humor in Worf. Humor in Worf is just like because Worf is always so serious, he's always so stoic. It's nice to be able to make fun of him a little bit.
It is. And I to me, so I think you were accurate when you say Data's humor comes from his innocence, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of scenes where Data is trying to be funny, right? He's trying to get a laugh even if he doesn't understand humor. With Worf, to me, Worf's humorous scenes come from awkwardness, right? Like for me, Worf's humor comes becomes even more the more awkward the situation is. Like the more awkward the situation, the funnier Worf is usually.
Yeah. Yeah. Because Worf, I could see him like being he's so Worf-like and such a warrior. He's like, well, like humor is kind of beneath him, right? So like
Yeah,
funny things are kind of beneath him. So because he's a warrior.
right.
Yeah.
Yep, I agree 100%. 100%. So, sorry, that was a little bit of a sidebar question, but
No,
when you
all good.
mentioned the scenes with Worf, I was like, "Hey, what do you think about?" Because to me, Worf's the funniest character in Star Trek. I
Mm,
really think that
yeah.
there's so much evidence to me to prove that Worf probably is the funniest character in Star Trek. People may disagree with that, and that's fine. But
There
it's
was
not Worf isn't funny because he's trying to be funny. Worf's funny because he's put in situations where he doesn't know how to act or respond because most of those situations are more human nature, and he's got that warrior Worf all the time mentality.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. There was like an interaction, an exchange between he and Dax. And Dax said something like, "Yeah, see, I was right," something like that. And Worf says, there was never any doubt. He says just like very flat, but I like that with that's like really nice. He's just he's very Worf is very happy, right, in his relationship with Dax. So I like that a lot.
Yeah, or there's the poem where he's like, "This poem is about a little ship that went on a trip, or whatever," and like that. There's just so many things about him. I mean, he drinks prune juice, and across TNG, DS9, and the movies too. There's a ton of humorous moments. So to me, it's Worf, probably Data number two,
Hmm.
and then number three is probably for me is Quark as far as humor goes.
Quark,
I
yeah.
I, I
Okay.
really think they're I really think those three are the funniest to me. But that's
There you
way off
go.
from what we're actually
Yeah.
talking about. But it just like I said, it really spurred my mind when you started talking about the funny wharf scenes. So
Yeah. Nice.
but yeah,
Nice.
so you're 100% right. We do get more Worf than we do Cisco, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. And I'm not against obviously Cisco centric episodes, but he's the captain or commander slash captain, so you're going to get a lot of that.
Hmm.
in this case, no issue at all with that whatsoever. And I think you're right. I think Cisco does a great job of empathizing with Kira because he has gone through something very similar to that. And I think when you're in a position of leadership, as Cisco is, when you've gone through situations and scenarios, and if you're in a leader, if you're a leader, period, when you go through things in your career or your life or whatever, and then somebody else that you are responsible for, whether you're supervising or you're, leading, whatever, I think that helps you empathize with them more. I think it helps you understand where they're coming from more, and then you have a level playing field or a similar frame of reference in which to use to help that person maybe get through what he or she may be going through. And so I think
Yeah.
that's really important in the situation with Cisco.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the writers did a good job recognizing that and having Cisco like say those lines that he did to Major Kira. You know,
Yeah,
that was she's going through a very parallel experience that he had with Jennifer. So that was good.
I agree. And before we forget, this
Yeah.
episode was directed by LeVar Burton.
Hmm.
So it's interesting to see LeVar, another TNG actor who gets into the directing chair, right? I think he directed some TNG, but you have people like Jonathan Frakes. I think Patrick Stewart had even directed one, maybe two episodes, but Jonathan Frakes directed a lot. LeVar Burton directed. Um, I want to say Michael Dorn might have.
Hmm.
But you start to see these actors that are now getting into the director's chair. Obviously, we know Avery Brooks has directed, is a great director as well. He directed some amazing episodes. Again, my brain's not working, but you know, uh,
Yeah.
one of
Yeah.
the most incredible episodes of DS9.
Yeah, where he was the writer, right? He was the
Correct.
writer,
Yep.
and it was in the 60s, I believe.
Yeah. That was oh my gosh, why can't I remember? My
No,
brain
no,
is
no, no. It's all good. It'll come back to us like
it will come
later
back
in
to
it'll
us.
come back to us later in the episode.
Yes.
For sure.
So, and in fact, we even talked about that with Nana Visitor
Hmm.
and her
Yeah.
experience as them shooting that episode. So this is another Trek actor who's gotten in the chair and directed, and it shows for sure.
You know,
So, oh, go ahead.
oh yeah. With uh, Burrell kind of showing up like on the ship and taking Kira hostage, because this is kind of interesting. Right? They kind of give Burrell amnesty, I should say, right? And um kind of forgiving that he actually took like a senior member of the station like hostage, but because it was him, like they're willing to give him amnesty and now essentially freedom. And so then he can be amongst the crew and then be and interact amongst like the senior members of the crew. Right. So I mean he has dinner with Worf and Dax and Kira. These are like the senior people. And they don't know anything about him, right? They don't. He looks like Vedic Barile, but it's not like they've really vetted him. And
Right.
so yeah, I was just thinking through that like right now, and they put a great deal of faith. Cisco would have put a great deal of faith and trust in Kira, kind of vetting and how she felt about Barile. So because
So
he's
what you're
got
saying is
yeah.
they didn't vet the Vedic.
They didn't vet the Vedic.
I'm sorry, I can't help
No.
it. But Far Beyond the Stars is the name of the episode.
See, it was gonna come back
Okay.
to us. Yeah.
And I call myself a DS9 fan.
Uh,
How dare I? No. Yeah, there is, and you see that as he's walking the promenade here as the episode moves forward, and he's getting a lot of stares, a lot of passerbyers. Remember, he's been on the station.
mhm.
Well, the the regular Vedic Barile from the Prime universe was on the station quite often, and in fact, he and Cisco had a pretty good relationship. Not hard to have a good relationship when you both have a common enemy, and that's Kai Wynn,
Yeah.
which is pretty much everybody's enemy minus Ducat when he later changed himself to look like a Bajoran, and they had that very bizarre season 7 relationship where they were, conjuring up the
Yeah.
paw race and things like that. But Bareil and Cisco had a pretty good relationship, I would say. And Bareil was minus a couple of rando Vedics and Kai Wynn, of course. Bareil was a fairly well-liked Vedic, I would say. That's my own personal opinion, I think. So it's interesting as this episode's moving forward, Chris. I think one of the things that I noticed, and you see this in other episodes too, especially Bazor, good lord, Bajoran specific episodes, is the amount of religion and religious focus this episode took.
Yeah, it did. So you have the contrast of the Vedic Bareil, who was a man of faith, and you've got this mirror universe version of him who Kira learns through conversation with him that he doesn't have faith, right? He doesn't have anything to believe in. She asks him specifically, like, don't you have gods in your universe? And he says, yeah, but I leave them alone. I just trust myself. And he doesn't have that faith back. He is the opposite of the Bareil that she knew, right? And
Yeah.
so, which I thought was appropriate, and this was a good contrast. And he even says, well, like, who are the prophets, or what are the prophets, something like that to effect, claiming that yeah, he doesn't have faith in his life. So that's so Kira fell in love with someone in her universe that was like a man of strong faith, and then she's getting to know this kind of version of Bareil that doesn't have faith. He's kind of trusted himself and relied on himself for all of these years, and she's exploring, like, who is that? But what that makes her want to do is then she's compelled to introduce him to faith, right? So
Right.
yeah, she sees he doesn't have anyone, so she's like, hey, why don't why don't we introduce you to the prophets?
And he initially declines,
Mm-hmm.
right? This is not
Yeah.
really his thing. And he says, some other time. She goes into the temple and she's in there. She's in this service that they're performing, and he ends up coming in later. He's curious, I think. And he mentions that, he needs a new start and maybe these prophets would be willing to help him. And so it shows the effect, I think, that Kira is having on him, maybe just as much as, well, we learn by the end of the episode that Kira has a massive effect on him, just like the effect that he initially had on her. Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this kind of almost like, and we talked about this before. We talked about this when I think we first jumped into the mirror universe. Maybe not quite in mirror, but definitely in when we started talking about the DS9 ones in the beginning. And I think we had this conversation, if I remember correctly, Chris, where we said if we were in a different situation, right? And we met a different version of our wife in the sense that, we didn't meet her at the same time, she's different, she's had different life experiences, whatever, because of, different choices. Would we still would that person, that version of our wife, or even of a friend, for example, would that person still draw us to them? Because the person we know right now may not be the same person given different choices and life experiences. And it's the same kind of thing here. But yet it seems to in this universe, right, that regardless, they're still drawn to each other. Meaning that Kira and Bareil, just like Jennifer and Benjamin Sisko, were kind of drawn to each other too. So the question is if things had been different and you meet your wife or a friend, or let's say, wife, meet in a completely different time in life, they're not the same person they are right now, or when you met them, I should say. Would you still choose them? Would you still be drawn to them? Because what you met at the time you met them, maybe that was part of the reason you were drawn to them. But would you still be drawn to them given that they're different because of
Mm-hmm.
different life choices? You know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah.
that kind of paradox situation.
Yeah. And this is a paradox, and you see throughout this episode that Kira is drawn to Baral, right? She's obviously drawn to him. There might be some, we learn later that maybe there's some manipulation that he's doing actually, to kind of make her feel drawn to him.
Yeah.
But what you're explaining about whether we would be drawn to the mirror universe or this alternate version of an individual that we are attached to in our universe is really interesting, because they would be different people. They would have made different choices. They've got different experiences. I right now I feel like it might be where if you met an alternate version, like if of your friend, or you met an alternate version of your spouse in a different universe, if they had like the same uh like internal values or internal compass, that you might feel like drawn to them, no matter if they had different experiences, right? But if they had the same kind of inner core set of values, you might feel like, oh, I'm still like drawn to this person. It'd be maybe a little bit slightly different because the person's had different experiences, but if you connect on the level of the values, I feel like, oh yeah, now I feel like this strong like connection with this person. And I think that Cisco and Jennifer, the mirror universe of Jennifer, had similar, kind of similar values. So Cisco like felt like drawn to her there. He was able to keep separate, but he did feel drawn. So that's how I am kind of getting to what I'm thinking about like now, and how I'm kind of arriving to the conclusion of how I feel, at least at this moment in time. Now, if the values were like completely separate, completely, really, really, really divergent, I think you pretty quickly go, oh no, um, this isn't right. This is not right, and I wouldn't feel connected to this person.
So
So
here's the question for you though, Chris.
yeah.
Why is Kira still drawn to now? I get it in the beginning, Berial tricked her,
Hmm.
right? But Kira's still, even after she finds out, she's still a little drawn to him, even though he's a thief now instead of a religious leader. And I do think it's important we mention this too in this episode, especially because of the amount of religion heavy this episode is, along
Yeah.
with several other, Bajoran centric episodes, right? This is one episode of Star Trek that would probably never have been made if Gene Roddenberry had been involved.
Hmm.
I think we've mentioned this before. We talked about D Space Nine, but Gene Roddenberry was not a religious man. He didn't put that really into Star Trek, at least not on the level it is in DS9. To me personally, I think this is great. What Rick Berman and Michael Piller did with DS9 and bringing this idea into it. We had Bajorans in TNG, right? You met Rolaren and stuff like that, but you didn't know much about them. There wasn't that religion heavy in TNG Bajorans like you know now with the DS9 Bajorans. I love what they did because if there were a galaxy full of different species and things like that, you'd have to believe that there are going to be other ones besides humans who have religious beliefs and views and things like that. Bajorans being one of them, obviously. And we do see that in other episode, like one-off episodes of random species we meet. Voyager, for example, is a good example of that, with the random characters that they meet in the Delta Quadrant that have religion in there too. But Bajorans to me are the most religious heavy of any of the main species we meet in Star Trek.
Yep, they most certainly are. They most certainly are. And to get to your question on why Kira would still be, wanting or drawn to this version of the mirror version of Baral, she's definitely projecting like her version of Baral like onto him, like who she wants him to be.
That's true.
And
Yeah.
and he's got to be aware of that, right? In the back, he's on this nefarious like clandestine mission that she isn't aware of at the time. So he's completely manipulating that. So, she's had a loss. Um, like she's totally projecting that onto him. Like this is the version that she wants.
And that's definitely what Jake did with Jennifer, his
Yeah.
mother, right?
Yeah.
And that's definitely what Cisco did with Jennifer too, right? I mean, I definitely think we've seen that's a great point you make of the idea of projecting someone on because I think we can do that too, right? If we have been in a previous relationship, and I probably have done this in the past, where you're in a relationship with somebody and then you break up with them, and then maybe there are certain aspects of that person that you enjoyed that you then project onto somebody else, but maybe that's not who they are. You know what I mean? And that can cause some strife. That can cause some friction. And I think we see that in the interactions with these characters and the projections. That's a really great point you made.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Um, and I think they deal with it very interestingly, like in this in this episode. I mean, there's two versions of Baral, and there's two versions of Kira that
Yeah.
we'll learn about in this episode too.
Yeah. And we see two versions of Kira at the same time, which is interesting.
Ah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So Kira asks him, after the service is over, um, about his opinion, and you know, still says, he's like, yeah, I've lived a long time without it. I don't know if I'm gonna quite I would be where you're at any point in my life. And she really says, you need to think about it and stuff. She invites him to the dinner. And
Yeah.
that's where you mentioned, right? The humorous moment with Worf. He comes to dinner and tells this kind of like witty story about how he fought this Klingon and got his mek'leth and everything. And Worf's just like, yeah, okay. Whatever
Yeah.
you say, dude. Whatever you say. Yeah. Yeah, right. It's kind of like that phrase people use all the time, which I'm not a huge fan of it, but it's like, tell me you've never fought a Klingon without telling me you've never fought a Klingon before in this
Yeah.
whole story. Um, but yeah, I mean, then I love what you mentioned when Worf's like, yeah, more more
More blood
blood wine.
wine.
Just this is very much like awkward silence monkey that he's trying to get off his back, right? And after dinner, Brile and Kira are walking together, and they're good. They're kind of good friends right now, and everything. They end up, of course, back in her. I think it's her quarters
Yeah.
or his quarters that he's got. I think it's her quarters. And to have a Raktajino, they're sitting on the couch, they're talking, and that eventually one thing leads to another, and then they wake up and they they've had a romantic evening together. Let's put it that way.
That's right.
Uh, but you know, Kira does mention that she does know the difference between the two different Barials and describing her version of Barial to him. But also interesting is she's surprised that this Barial is able to finish one of the quotes
Oh,
that
yeah.
the other Barial had. And I guess he says, oh, I did some research or whatever. Um, very, very strange. It would be strange, right? Because I think there's even a quote where he's like, this must be very strange for you. You and I here together, me looking like him. Even he knows it's weird,
Yeah.
right? And I obviously with her surprise, the time that Kira spent in the mirror universe, she never saw Mirror Barial. I don't believe.
She did not, as I recall.
I don't
There
think
were,
they ever ran into each other.
what was the quote that they finished again that he finishes for her,
I
if you
I don't
recall?
remember off the top of my
Yeah.
head. Yeah.
So this makes me think like because he does finish that quote and he says, "Oh yeah, I did some research on Baral." Um, and he acknowledges that, he must have been that the Prime Universe Baral was, well respected, well loved, and it really must be well missed. So he must have done like some um like nefarious research before he came over, right? Just because this is all kind of fits into this plan on like,
It's starting to paint the picture of maybe
yeah,
that something else is up, right?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. Because he's, this is too perfect for Kira being drawn to this version of Baral. So, kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Because what if, I'm just thinking through this, because Baral is saying at the beginning when she meets him, yeah, I'm not a man of faith, right? Because he's portraying himself as essentially opposite of the Baral she knows. Like she's wanting to fill in those gaps, right? I'm not a man of faith. Therefore, she goes, oh, okay, well, why is he not a man of faith? Why isn't he like the Burrell I know? Like how can I help him come to faith? So he's totally, I think, playing that and playing Kira.
Yeah. And if you've never seen this episode before, this is your first time, right?
Yeah.
You're going through it and you're believing, right, that he is sort of coming around a little bit. He's maybe things about him are similar enough to Belial. And so she thinks, well, maybe I can make him more like the Belial I knew, right? This, like you said, that's a great
Hmm.
point. The projecting, right? She's projecting her Belial onto him and trying to get him to be more like the Belial she knew. And that doesn't really go well, right? And even at the Replimat later, he's really dazed and confused. He's just Kira's taking him to the back to the Bajoran
Mm.
temple on the
Yeah.
station, and he's had an orb experience.
Yeah.
First one of his life. He never had that in the mirror universe. And it's made him really tired and really dazed. And one of the things that's important here is when he's getting ready to have the orb experience, the other Vedic there does some magic with the computer and turns off a force field that the orb is behind, which plays a part later on in the episode. And then he goes up, opens the thing up, has the orb experience, and then we cut back to the Replimat afterwards. And this is where Kira's like, what you're feeling's normal. People get tired afterwards. It's a big experience. And he begins to tell her about his experience. And she's like, no, 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 you shouldn't share this. So orb experiences are meant to be kept to yourself. It's a very private thing, right? It would be kind of like if you have if you believe in God, right, and you had a moment where you literally talked to God, that's going to be a private moment most likely, right? And if you sharing it with somebody else probably isn't going to be the same. Just like in this case, his experience with the orb is not going to be the same as if Kira had gone through it with him.
Yeah, I felt a little bit sympathetic for him for Brile at that moment because I felt like, oh, he's coming out of this thing that happened, right? And he's like, well, I gotta tell somebody.
Yeah,
I gotta tell somebody. Can I tell you,
that's a big
Kira?
moment, right? Yeah,
Yeah. Can I tell you, Kira? And she's like, you shouldn't be telling me this.
yeah.
So so
Right. Well, but then this is where everything changes because then
mhm.
right he goes back to his quarters to get some rest. Kira's like, you should get some rest, go sleep, whatever. And he goes back to his quarters, and all of a sudden, in from the other room comes the intendant. And when the intendant shows up, and I'll be honest with you, it's been a long time since I've watched this episode.
Yeah.
So when the intendant shows up, did you think to yourself, Chris, when you were watching this, oh, okay, yeah, this is what's been going on here might have been a little bit of a charade. Because
Yeah.
otherwise, what I thought two things. One of two things. Either A, he's on a mission for her, so he's been playing Kira, or B, he was trying to get away from her. She found out where he went, and now she's here to bring him back, snatch him back.
Yeah.
One of those two situations.
Yeah. The one that came to my mind was, oh, they're here like on to manipulate Kira and do something bad with the station. So that's what came to my mind as soon as I saw the intendant. And I hadn't seen this episode in a long while either, so I couldn't remember what the conclusion was going to be. Like, I mean,
Yeah,
I thought, oh,
same.
you know, maybe maybe this version of the mirror universe, like Baral's gonna die, like in some, he's gonna save the station or something, and he's gonna die as well. And but no, he he's kind of a nefarious guy. So
Yeah, I didn't
yeah,
remember a ton about this episode. I remembered a little bit, but not a lot. And for those of you who are like, well, you're a big DS9 fan, don't you remember them all? No. I may have watched them through 7 times or something like that, but that doesn't mean I'm going to remember every detail of every episode either. So come on, guys, give me a little bit of a break here, all right? But yeah, I had those kind of two thoughts in my mind. Either she followed him and he's trying to get away from her, which has happened before, right? I mean, look at what happened when Smiley came over. He came over and grabbed Cisco and brought him back and said,
yeah,
"Hey, we need he was kind of on the run, like we need your help, right, to fight off the alliance."
yeah, that's right.
So big thing here, but it's a very interesting moment because the intendant and Belial then share this moment where you then learn of the nefarious plans that they have devised prior to coming over.
Yeah. And Nana Visitor does a great job of playing both versions, playing the intendant and playing Kira. Because the intendant, she plays it. The intendant is very playful, but she's very devious, very evil. She's saying, "Hey, Barile, when you see Kira, kiss her like this, or this is what it's like to be Kira. Oh, like how exciting, how wonderful." So she's just totally playing with that circumstance, no matter who it is, no matter who's around that kind of circle of the intendant, she plays with them deviously, all of them, whether it was Cisco, Baral, Quark, she totally messes with them. That's kind of
It really,
that's who she is. Yeah.
yeah, she really does. You're 100% right in that. She's playful, but she's the kind of playful where while she's being playful to your face, she's gonna stab you right in the back,
Hmm.
right, with a knife or something like dagger or something like that, right? She is very much someone who comes across a certain way, but she gets snapped like that.
Yeah. Everything's like a toy to her, maybe, or a thing that she
Yeah,
can manipulate and have her own way with.
right, 100%.
Yeah.
And so when they're talking about the plan, you can see in Barial's eyes and expression a little bit that the plan that they had, I don't think he had intentions of having some feelings for Kira, the Prime Universe Kira, because the plan that has been devised by them, he begins to, you can see it just in his face, to second guess it and wonder if maybe it's the right thing to do because of, I think because of the orb experience and
Mhm.
because of what's happened between him and Kira.
Yeah, I completely agree. Now he's having second thoughts. Like he likes Major Kira. He's had this presumably he's never had a moment of faith, and now he's had this orb experience, and he's wondering he's having an existential crisis with his life at the moment.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and honestly, if you think about it, Chris, this particular episode makes me believe that the mirror universe Burial probably has never had any sort of substantial relationship, right? Like been a lot of probably like what the intended is, a lot of like using there's something to be gained here. There's no substance. It's not a whatever the word is, a substance relationship.
mhm. Yeah,
So and with Kira, there seems to be something there, even if it's not a lot, because they've known each other that long. There does seem to be something there.
yeah, yeah, I agree. Yeah, yeah. So it is. Uh, yeah, it is interesting that Burrell's like behaving in this way, and um, I guess we could say that. Yeah, we could. It was pretty much expected that would come to that way. He would feel some sort of connection or uh, doubt on ultimately like having to betray Kira,
Right.
right?
And we've
So
seen this before, right? We've seen
yeah,
this story before in the sense that you see somebody who's been sent on a mission to betray somebody and then they end up having second thoughts because, they actually like the person. And I mean, it's a tale as old as time, as they say, right?
yeah. I think it's Quark, right? That Quark has a conversation with Kira to kind of let her know, hey, like, how's it going with Baral? Seems like you guys are doing okay. But let me give you like my sense of Baral. He's either I saw him in the area where the orb was, and it was either like he was having some thoughts about faith, or maybe he wanted to steal it. So
Yeah.
she
It's interesting that Quark, of all people, is warning Kira or looking out for Kira a little bit because Kira can't stand Quark for the most part, right? I mean, Quark and Kira, the Quark's always kind of, sees her and pines after her a little bit, her
yeah.
and Dax, but Kira can't really stand him. And so for
Yeah.
Quark to kind of look out for her, I think says something about Quark's character. Quark could just be like, oh, whatever. Quark may be kind of devious and things like that, but there's a little bit of a code he has. I mean, he does have the rules of acquisition, but we've talked about this before. Quark is somebody who wants desperately to be the best Ferengi possible, but yet he has this conscience that keeps screwing with his plans. And this is kind of one of those moments because when Barial shows up in Quark's and is sits down and is there drinking and they're the crowd's going wild and they're chanting or I'm sorry, not chanting that, but Quark and him are chatting about how much he looks like Vedic Barial. Quark realizes that something smells a little fishy with this guy.
Yeah, Quark's got a good sense of people, and which makes sense, right? He sees people like all the time in his bar, and so he should have that kind of underlining sense of understanding motives or sensing motives from people. So totally makes sense that Quark would be the one, I feel, to kind of share that with Kira. I
But
mean,
Quark may. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
yeah. I mean, even like Worf, you know, Worf had this sense where he thought, oh, he must have been exaggerating, like, or you totally lying when you're talking about battling that Klingon. But that was kind of it. That stopped there, right? But Quark knew there was something behind it.
He did, 100%. And I love the little exchange they have when he's sitting at the bar where Quark says, "It's an amazing resemblance. Put you in a Vedek's robe and no one would know the difference." And Bareil goes, "Well, believe me, there is a difference." And Quark goes, "Not to the paying public,"
Yeah.
which is this idea of Bareil being able to put on a facade, right? Being able to put on a costume for his purposes and be able to play it off as the real Bareil. But the one thing about Bareil is even though he's kind of a thief and maybe a little bit of a degenerate, even he knows it ain't gonna work.
Yeah.
I'm not the same guy. I may look like him, but I'm not the same guy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. He's not the same guy. People would feel it, right? Just on how he presents himself, how he'd come across, people would feel that.
Yeah. And the line you were talking about where Quark and Kira are exchanging, where Quark says, "I take it you like him," and she says, "Let's just say I like the idea," or no, Kira says to Quark, "I take it you like him," and Quark says, "Let's just say I like the idea of you with him, but I'll tell you one thing, Major, you'd better brace yourself. You're in for a rough ride." Even Quark can see
Ah,
it. Yeah,
yeah.
even Quark sees that. So it's very apparent in the situation that happens. But in the cargo bay, Quark arrives to pick up what else? Saurian brandy. I mean, that's Saurian brandy was Kirk's favorite drink in the original series, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So, or alcoholic beverage of choice. And he sees Kira checking the inventory, and they start chatting. And he notices Bareil is a bit different from the men that she normally picks.
Mm.
Um, but you know, Quark still is this idea that you know Kira needs to be careful. Kira needs to be careful because Bareil was figuring out how to rob the temple, and that's what he was trying
Hmm.
to warn her about, right? And so that leaves Kira going, maybe I should think about this. And then if it hadn't been for Quark, honestly, if it hadn't been for Quark, Kira might not have showed up at the Bajoran temple right in the midst while he is trying to steal the orb.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So
Oops.
Quark should be vetting everybody, is what this means.
Well, Quark would know what to look for, would he not?
Yeah, he would know.
He really would. And as a matter of fact, from memory serves me correctly, which it's not serving me too well tonight, but if memory serves me correctly, I do believe there are moments where Quark has turned people into Odo. In fact, in particular, if you remember the episode, Chris, where he's selling weapons, technically selling weapons with his cousin Gala,
Yeah.
and ends up deciding to turn both sides in.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And remember that? And he kind of plays a part in that. So Quark's a good judge of character.
Yeah,
Quark
he
could
is.
recognize pretty quickly, mostly because I think Quark does a lot of shady stuff himself, and he knows what to look for, right?
You can see it immediately, can smell it like a dog.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So we then jump to a moment where the intendant, now dressed up as Major Kira, because she goes to Brile, and Brile's like, man, I can't tell you two apart. And the intendant dresses up as Major Kira and then goes to this cargo bay to try to get entry into the cargo bay.
Oh, right. And she's forgotten her security code or something, and then says to the cargo bay guard, says, "Oh, will you like I sprained my muscle or something exercising
Yeah,
on the holiday?"
shoulder, I think it was, or something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then she gives him this line, "Can you help like massage it?" And then
The
he's
guy
like,
just like, yeah, sure, I guess. Like, it's
yeah,
kind
that's
of
why I
a
was like, he was like, "Well, okay." Like,
well, I mean, it's like, dude, you've been I mean, well, who knows how long this particular rando, security guard's been serving on the station? But it's like, has the major ever asked you to do that? Like, why? You think he'd be a little bit more, you know, sensing of something, that maybe something's a little fishy here?
yeah, I guess not.
Apparently not.
Yeah. She dispatches him after that. So
Yeah, pretty
yeah,
easily,
yeah.
pretty easily, right?
Uh,
And interesting because she goes into that cargo bay, and right there she's able to reconfigure the transporter with that interdimensional device that she somehow pulls out of her boot. That thing looked way too big to fit in that boot. I'm sorry. There would have been a big old bulge in that boot. I don't know how that thing could have fit in there because those boots are small on her legs. So I
Yeah,
don't know that I'm buying her fitting that in there.
yeah,
But at the same time she's doing that, that's when Belial is breaking into the temple and trying to steal the orb, and then Kira shows up. The
yeah,
real Kira, the Prime Universe Kira shows up.
yeah. So confirming what Quark had tried to warn her about. Now she's got to deal with that, come to reckoning on what Baral's kind of actual motivations were, what he was really there on the station to do, which is steal the orb. I think to help the Alliance, the orb is a powerful artifact, so that would help the Alliance on their side and the Mirror Universe greatly on their cause. So essentially to steal power so that the Alliance can win.
Right.
Yeah,
Which makes sense in this case.
yeah,
And you see the look on Kira's face, under not understanding why he would do this. And I think the look also told me when I was watching it, Chris, that she realized she got fooled. She got played.
yeah,
And
yeah.
she thought she didn't see it coming. And that to me is probably maybe a little bit of a huge knock on her ego, a little bit, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
I think Kira would probably pride herself on the ability to read people, having been a freedom fighter and having been, or a terrorist if you're a Cardassian, I guess. But with her experiences and her dealing with stuff, that she probably didn't think that something like this would happen to her.
Yeah, especially like at the very beginning of the episode, in her conversation with Dax, like on the treble lift, they were making a big deal about Kira being so, um, particular or discerning or specific about the people that she would want to be involved with,
Right.
you know, making that a big thing. So yeah, she's definitely been duped, been played here. So
Yeah.
definitely knocked her down several levels, I would say.
And then this is when the intendant shows up now, dressed as Major Kira.
Okay, yeah,
And, they have this confrontation, and the intendant talks about, oh, being good to see or whatever. Because if we remember correctly, back to the first DS9 Mirror Universe episode, it's Kira and Bashir, I believe, that are the ones that go into the Mirror Universe first. They're the first ones to
yeah,
cross over since Kirk did back in, you know, the original series episode Mirror Mirror. And so, they're seeing each other, and there's this conversation going on. She begins to explain to her that, Barial is pretty much a pansy. He's lacks courage. He's an irredeemable thief, and who basically duped Kira.
yeah,
And you could tell Barial's not too pleased with this, and just is like, and pops her and shoots her and stuns her. And then
yeah,
he's like, oh yeah, I'll figure out. She's gonna be pretty angry at me when she comes to, but I'll figure out a way to talk out of this. I've done it before. And this idea of he has this ability to talk his way out of tough situations. Being a thief, I guess you'd probably have to, right? If you're,
yeah.
And maybe you're not a good thief if you're getting caught all the time. But clearly, this isn't the first time he's had to do this.
Yeah, and I think that he beams out shortly thereafter, right? He
With the intendant, yeah.
yeah, with the intendant. Yeah.
Yeah.
So then the episode kind of ends from there with Kira being knocked down a few levels there.
So think about this, Chris. Um, Captain Cisco went through a again very similar situation in the sense that he went through a situation where he lost Jennifer the first time, his Jennifer.
Mhm.
Then he has to say goodbye to Mirror Universe Jennifer, which is almost sort of kind of like losing her all over again.
Yeah.
Then Kira goes through something where her Baral that she knew is killed. And now she's having to say goodbye to Barial, another Barial all over again. And that the episode leaves where she's there left alone in the temple. Obviously sad. This is definitely taking a toll on her. This episode and the situation that Kira goes through is so similar to what, as we mentioned earlier in this episode, what Cisco went through with Jennifer.
Yeah. I would say on here, Kira's got to be so disappointed at herself, angry, probably disappointed in herself and angry at Baral and just thinking like, how did I let this happen? Right. So
Right.
she's not this isn't really Baral hasn't died, so she's not like losing the same person again. She's just feeling like betrayed, duped, played. So she's got to feel like all those emotions of anger on the
Yeah.
circumstance and the situation.
100%. It's very obviously a very Kira centric episode. I want to ask you. So we've if you've been following along with us for a while now through our spotlight episodes, we've done a lot, obviously, of Mirror Universe. We've been going through the Mirror Universe episode, which was a great idea on your part, Chris. It's been fun to because you watch the Mirror episodes and they're
Yeah.
splattered in with all the other episodes, right? I don't think I've ever done any Star Trek watch where I went through and watched these episodes in order, just the Mirror Universe episodes.
Yeah. Yeah. So this gives you a little bit of what's fun is you have a little sense of chronology about what's happening in the mirror universe, like with
Yep.
the Alliance, right? Oh, what's happening there. So I like that part. Obviously there's like these huge gaps, but that's what I like about doing these mirror universe episodes like sequentially.
Yeah, I agree. I think it really helps. It helps to say, oh yeah, I remember the last episode this happened versus you're watching one every like season or two, and there's so much more in between that you maybe
Mhm.
forget, what might have actually happened during that last episode.
Yeah.
So it's definitely helpful. Um, if you look at the Mirror Universe episodes that we've watched, Chris, where do you put this kind of? I mean, I'm not asking you to rank every one, but is this up there with some of your favorite ones, or is this maybe the least favorite one you've watched? Where would you kind of put this one?
I would have to say this is the least favorite one that I've seen like so far because the ones that have come before, right? You've got in Toss, you have the original one with Kirk and Spock going, and that was just so cool. In
Yeah,
Toss and the Terran Empire, and then the other ones where you had Bashir and Kira go in and you first meet the intendant, and then Smiley. There's a lot of action that happens, and then getting reintroduced to Jennifer, and you've got Cisco going across too. A lot of action, intrigue, and you had the Cisco Dax kind of romance, cross universe romance that was interesting. Um, yeah, this one, if I was thinking about this, if this episode didn't exist, I don't know that there's really much change like in anything, right? It didn't like
yeah,
propel, didn't change anything on the mirror universe side, right? So the other stuff did, like the in Toss, Spock and Kirk affected the Terran Empire greatly,
significantly.
significantly, right?
Yeah,
Then definitely when Cisco came over, he totally affected the mirror universe like significantly. Um, but this one, I'm not sure that there's any like real effect. They didn't get the orb. So that didn't happen. And so only effect was like Kira's should be like really angry that she let herself be duped.
Right.
And then yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Then
I would agree. I would agree. I think
yeah.
for me, I would say this is my least favorite so far. It's not a terrible episode, but I think you put it perfectly. It doesn't further the mirror universe.
Hmm.
And if I remember correctly, this is the first quote unquote mirror universe episode where they don't actually go to the mirror universe.
Yeah. They come
All the other
here.
ones, I think they went at some point, right?
Hmm.
They would
Right.
cross over. This one didn't go there at all. It was the mirror universe, the alternate universe characters coming to the mirror universe or to the prime universe,
That's right.
which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it just didn't feel as much like a mirror universe. It felt more like oh, Barial's back, but it's not really Barial. It's kind of from somewhere else, and it feels more like a mirror universe towards the end once the intendant shows up. But even then, they're not in the mirror universe. The intendant doesn't have any kind of really any power to do much of anything. Like her being there doesn't really do anything.
Yeah.
That's it. Like she doesn't have minions and lackeys and people to run around and do stuff for her. She's not head of the alliance. I mean, there's just so many things, right? That it just to me, you're 100% right. If this episode hadn't been made, the mirror universe would probably still be the same.
Yeah.
I think this is more of an opportunity to uh, have another relationship affected by the fact that somebody else on the other side looks like somebody they knew, and then kind of playing off that. But I mean, there aren't too many episodes that I can think of where Kira's duped the way in which she is in this one.
Yeah.
She's pretty astute to this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So
So maybe
I don't
maybe in
know.
the
Interesting
broad.
episode for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So maybe in the broader sense of things for like DS9, it's more of a further development of Kira's character, right?
Yeah.
So because it doesn't propel the DS9 arch too much
Right.
in terms of what happens. But this is more like, okay, how can Kira's character grow more? Like I think this kind of fills that spot.
All right. So overall, Chris, this episode, we're probably in the same lines, right? Like it's not a terrible episode. It's just across the mirror universe. To me, this is probably the least of all of them so far.
Yeah, I agree. If we were to think about it like a filler, it's kind of like a filler episode, especially those seasons where you had like 20 plus episodes of DS9 of Star Trek. This would be one that I kind of categorize like as a filler. I mean, the Kira's characters is advanced the most, but little effect on the broad overall arch of DS9 and
Yeah.
and really no effect of propelling the mirror universe forward.
Yeah, I would agree. And they have said before that there are filler episodes, right? Episodes that were just kind of they, sort of threw in there and was filling up space because they did. They had to do they were doing 20 some episodes a season. Now you're lucky if you get 10 episodes in a season for a show.
Mhm.
So anyways, yeah. So we've enjoyed this. Once again, we've looked at another Mirror Universe episode. We've got one more in DS9 to go as part of our Spotlight series on the Mirror Universe, and that is The Emperor's New Cloak, which should be a lot of fun to watch as Quark and Rom go to the Mirror Universe to rescue Grand Nagus Zek. It's a lot of fun, and we look forward to talking about that sometime in the near future, along with many other episodes to come. But this has been fun, Chris. Always enjoy talking about the stuff we love. It's a great brain break, as we've said before, to just kind of, get away from some of the craziness that is work and life and just talk about things we really like.
Yeah, it totally is. Totally is. And the universe and the mirror universe will force us to watch Discovery. So,
But I will say
well,
though, Discovery
yeah,
has some pretty good Mirror Universe episodes.
it
That
does.
that that that,
Yeah.
that is true. So I know we're
Yeah.
we're not neither one of us are really much Discovery fans, but gotta give them credit. They do have some good Mirror Universe episodes, and then the Empress or whatever her
Hmm.
the
Yeah.
Captain Georgia's alternate counterpart. She's a pretty good villain and sticks around for quite a while. So that's going to be fun to talk about at some point too,
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
for sure. But anyway, so yeah, thank you as always for watching and listening all over the globe and the interwebs. We very much appreciate it. We hope you've enjoyed this look at the Star Trek Deep Space Nine Mirror Universe episode Resurrection. Uh, probably not the greatest, but it was still fun to talk about, and definitely some things we can take away from this, and this idea of projecting people onto others, and this idea of confusion when it comes to seeing somebody we already know, and how would we react if we were dealing with somebody who looked identical to somebody else we knew but was very different. And I think that's been kind of a theme throughout the mirror universe, Chris.
Yeah, absolutely. It has been. And so, I mean, you get to explore all of that with the different Kirks, with the different Spocks, different Cisco's, different Kira's. Yeah, it's really interesting, fascinating idea, and Star Trek does a good job of exploring it.
Yeah, I mean, the original series Mirror Mirror episode must have been really kind of groundbreaking back in the
Hmm.
60s, right? I mean, I can't remember much science fiction discussing alternate universes and things like that back then. Not like it is now.
Yeah, that's a good one. This makes I'm gonna do some research on that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And he
Good
will, folks.
question.
He will,
Yeah.
and he'll bring it back to us for sure with some well thought out research. But yes, thank you as always for watching, everybody. Be sure to check us out on Facebook and Instagram. You can find us there. And along with our YouTube channel, if you listen to the podcast, you can find all the video versions of this episode and others, or several others, anyways. I mean, not all of them, on YouTube. So thanks again, and we'll catch you next time right here on the Random Redshirt Podcast.